Today I'm back with my plastic bag to try and achieve a new texture in resin. One of you lovely people commented on one of my videos suggesting laying a layer of rocks on the plastic bag on resin, and this has me really intrigued, so here we are. I thought today we can make some resin pendants since my rocks are pretty small, and as for the resin, I'm going to be using Let's Resin Fast Cure resin since it's on the thicker side. I'm thinking we want to make sure the rocks don't fully sink into the resin, because if they do, they could get trapped in there and then it would be impossible to get them out. So we just want those rocks to leave their imprint in the resin. Now, before we get started, I just want to put a trigger warning out there that if this works, our resin should end up with some kind of holes or cavities. So if you're someone who has trypophobia, the fear of holes, then you may want to skip this video. So with that being said, the first thing I want to do is cut down my plastic bag into smaller squares that are still big enough to cover up the pendant cavities on my mold. I also have to make sure they're still big enough to handle the rocks I'm going to be putting on top of them, because the weight of the rocks will push the plastic down into the resin, and we don't want the resin to come up and over onto the plastic, if that makes any sense. Now I'm going to go ahead and mix up my resin, and since this resin is on the thicker side, I'm going to quickly put it in my Resiner's bubble remover machine for 5 minutes to get rid of some of these air bubbles, since we do have quite a lot of them here. Let's Resin's Fast Cure resin is on the thicker side since it cures so fast, so if you guys do have this resin, I do recommend putting the resin bottles in some warm water before mixing. That way the viscosity of the resin will be slightly thinner, but be aware that when you start playing and messing with resin's temperatures, you can cut down on your work time. So don't leave your resin too long in that warm bath, and don't make that water too hot. As you guys can see, most of those pesky air bubbles are gone now, and I'm gonna fill up my mold. I'm only going to be filling each pendant cavity about halfway up with resin, so that way when I put the rocks, hopefully we won't have much overspill. Overspilled resin can be so tricky to fix sometimes that it's just best to avoid it completely if possible. The next thing I'm going to do is lay down the plastic over the resin. The best way I found to do this without creating a mess was to work from the middle out. This way I didn't get that many air bubbles trapped, and it was also a lot easier to move the plastic when I needed to. By the way, I'm just using a popsicle stick to help me put down the plastic, just to make it easier on me and to avoid getting resin on my gloves. As we all know, resin can be pretty sticky, and getting that on your gloves can be pretty annoying. So clean gloves equals happy crafter. That should be my new slogan. As you guys can see, we do have a couple of small air bubbles trapped under the plastic here, but that's okay. I'm just going to leave them there. Hopefully they'll give the pendants a cool effect later once they're cured. So now that the plastic is down, we can go ahead and put down these rocks. And I actually found these at my local beach. Now, before you guys yell at me for stealing the rocks, I promise I will put them back once I'm done using them. I'm only going to keep the ones that have come into contact with resin, so don't come after me. Anyways, I'm not putting the rocks down in any specific order. I'm just randomly placing them down where they fit. But as I'm doing this, I can already see that we may end up with some issues. Although I consciously cut the plastic squares bigger, I can already see that I probably had to cut them even bigger than I did. I can already see that resin trying to seep through and possibly getting onto the plastic bag. But I'm going to keep going, and hopefully we won't have much overspill in the morning. I'm really hoping this rock texture thing works, because if it does, this could be so pretty in pendants. I've really been having so much fun playing with these different textures in resin and seeing what we can do with different things in epoxy. I think it really makes resin art way more interesting with all these experiments. So now that all the pendants are covered with the rocks, I'll be back in the morning and we'll go from there. Good morning, guys. I can already see that today is going to be an interesting day, because what we didn't want happening has happened. So in some of these pendants, the resin did end up coming up and over the plastic bag and getting onto the rocks. So now the question is, can we still remove the rocks from the resin? What I'm going to do is I'm going to fully take the pendant out of the mold and see if that helps. And yeah, okay, the resin has cured the plastic and the rocks all together, and there's no getting these out. I'm going to take the rest of the pendants out, and let's see if we have any here that can actually be used. I'm also not seeing that rock texture I was trying to achieve in resin, so let's see. So we only really have 2 pendants where I could fully take out the rocks and the plastic. As you guys can see, the rest of the pendants have the rocks cured in them, and once something's cured in resin, it's pretty much stuck in there forever, which is a total shame. But it's okay, I'm still going to make something with these pendants. I don't want that resin to go to waste. The rocks in there still look really pretty. I just have to figure out how I'm going to finish them, but I'll be sure to show you guys once they're done. So what I want to do now is I'm going to try again. I really want to see if I can make this happen. I think the resin I used might actually be a little bit too thick, and then with the tension and also the thickness of the plastic, those rocks aren't settling into the resin. This time I'm going to use deep pour resin instead, and hopefully, since this resin does take a lot longer to cure, and since its viscosity is a lot thinner than the fast cure resin, it should give the rocks more time to sink and settle into the resin. I'm also going to pour even less resin into the mold, so about less than halfway up the mold, and hopefully these adjustments will fix the issues, so keep your fingers crossed for me, you guys. I'm just going to quickly do one pendant for you guys, just so you guys can see that I'm pretty much doing the exact same thing as the previous pendants. Deep pour resin does take 48 hours to 36 hours to cure, so I'll only be able to see whether or not this works in 2 to 3 days. The joys of epoxy, am I right? Comment down below which type of resin you use if you're a resin crafter. Now I'm going to let these cure, and I'll be back in a couple of days to see if it works. But luckily for you, it's only going to be a couple of seconds. Okay, so it's now been a couple of days, and let's see what we've got. I'm just going to quickly remove all the rocks and the plastic. And wow, this is so much nicer. It's so easy getting the rocks and the plastic out. At least the Twix I did has helped with this part. Okay, so again, I'm not seeing that rock texture that I was hoping for. I guess this is going to be a bit harder to achieve than I was thinking it was going to be, but we do have some really nice texture in the resin though. I'm really liking the ripply effect the bag has left, but I do think the plastic bag is what's not letting this happen. I'm going to have to figure out how and what I can use to be able to put the rocks in the resin and then be able to take them out once the resin has cured. I'm thinking maybe some kind of latex or mold release. I'm not exactly sure. But because we did end up getting this really pretty effect on these pendants, nonetheless, I do want to finish them the way I was planning to finish them. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my chameleon powders, and with a makeup brush, I'm going to dust them onto the pendants. I've chosen my favorites, blue, olive, and teal. Then I'm going to mix up some regular epoxy resin, dye half of it white and the other half of the resin black. These chameleon powders really pop on a black base, but I also wanted to show you guys how they look on a white background because they can look really pretty too. Let's Resin has sent me their intense chameleon powders, and I'm so excited to try them. I've mentioned in previous videos that I really like these powders, so them having an intense set is exciting, and I'm so looking forward to trying them, so be sure to keep an eye out for that video if you guys are interested in knowing what those are like. By the way, I was contemplating on whether or not I should have added the footage from my first attempt at this in this video, but as you guys can see, I decided to in the end because I think it is important for you guys to see that us YouTubers don't always get it right away when we're trying or doing something. I know it's easy to assume that, but because I try to keep my videos as short as possible, I don't always add that footage of the mistakes and the mishaps. But believe me, there's many, and although I've been crafting with resin for a few years now, I think I'm on my 4th year. Wow, it's been a while. And sometimes I still feel like I'm a newbie and I have no idea what I'm doing. Anyways, I've also dusted the 2 pendants from my first attempt, and I'm going to be filling them with resin so we can see how they turn out. We may get overspill on these since they're not in the mold, but we might as well try. Let's see if there's a difference between these pendants made with the fast cure and the ones in the mold made with the deep pour. And again, I'm going to let these cure overnight, and I'll be back tomorrow for the reveal. Okay guys, so all the pieces are cured, but since there's quite a few of them to demold, I'm just going to be doing this voiceover with my final thoughts while I'm demolding them, and that way the ending to this video won't be too long. So unfortunately, as you guys can see, we didn't end up with that raw cavity texture I was going for in the resin. I'm gonna have to figure out another way how to do it, which I'm pretty sure it can be done. I just need a little bit more time to put on my thinking cap and see what I can come up with. This is such a cool idea, and I really want to make it happen. I'm still thinking that it might be from the plastic bag being too thick, and then with the tension of the resin, the rocks aren't properly settling into the resin. I'm not exactly sure, But as you guys can see, we still did end up with some absolute gorgeous pendants, and I'm still actually pretty impressed. It seems that we just ended up doing the same technique with the plastic bag as my previous video, but this time no scrunching up the plastic. I do love how they turned out. When it comes to the white pendants, all I can think of are snowy mountaintops, and yeah, I still think they're super pretty, and I'd love to know what you guys think. Some of the pieces still need a little bit more work to finish them off. There's quite a few here that have some pretty sharp edges, so I'm definitely going to be sanding them down with some sandpaper. Which reminds me, I had a question the other day on one of my previous videos as to what grit sandpaper I use, and to be honest, I'm not exactly sure. I buy my sandpaper from the Dollar Tree, and it comes in a pack with like 3 different grits, I think, but it doesn't specify the grit. But I do start with a coarser one and then sand down the piece to the shape that I want it, get off all those little sharp edges, and then once I've sanded off what I want off, I then finish it with a finer grit to give it a smooth finish. I'd love to know your thoughts on what's been done here, and be sure to comment down below if you have any suggestions on how we can make this rock texture in resin work. As always guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and that you've learned something. If you did, then please smash that like button, and if you guys want to see other things I've done with resin, then be sure to click on one of the videos that's popping on screen now. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.